And we are live. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is the Justice and Memory Project, and this is our 16th meeting. We have been working on avenues of atonement. From the Leonardtown Project was voted on unanimously and approved. The resolution was, and the mayor of Athens assembled a team called the Justice and Memory Team, which is his team, in September of 2020 to work on avenues of atonement. So, and we have been working hard on the resolves in the resolution. So with that, we always start our meeting off with a moment of silence for those residents and descendants that have passed on. So let's go to a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, the minutes of the meeting was already sent out. If everybody is okay with those minutes, then we can go ahead and vote on them. Is anybody in on amendments to the meeting? Okay, Jen, you want to do your normal thing for approving it?
Yeah, sure. So all those who approve the minutes say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
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 Yes. Anyone opposed? Abstain? All right, we got minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we're going to move into a research report. This report was created at the request of the Athens-Clarke County Mayor Office and developed in consultation with the Mayor Gertz and some of the members of the Athens Justice and Memory Project. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Dr. Shannon to report on the results of his research. And he and Dr. Richard Martin and Aiden, I'm not going to mess up Aiden's last name.
Iselin.
Iselin, okay. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Jared.
Well, great, and thanks for the introduction, Hetty. It's a pleasure to speak with you all today. Just for some background, I'm a faculty member here at University of Georgia in the Department of Geography and Financial Planning, Housing, Consumer Economics. I'm going to share some slides with y'all, and hopefully this looks good. Y'all can see that, I'm assuming. So I'm going to report some research today that we did, as Ms. Hattie said, at the request of the mayor's office related to financial losses from urban renewal in Linnentown, specifically related to property loss. And so that's as you'll see, that's the main question we're trying to answer. And so there's a full report that details the findings from this research. It's available now on the Community Mapping Lab website. If you just Google Community Mapping Lab on the main page, there's a link to some resources related to Linnentown, which include this report if you'd like to see more details than what I'm able to provide here. This is meant to be a pretty broad overview that touches on kind of the major findings and the general methodology that we used to approach this issue. All right, so most of the folks who are on this call know or were part of Linnentown, but just for some background, this is a Black community that was close to the UGA campus. Can y'all see my cursor if I move it around on that page? Are you able to see that? If it's moving around, okay. And so here's Sanford Stadium. These are freshman dorms now that were created because of the destruction of Linnentown, and the boundaries of Linnentown are this green line that's present right here, and it mirrors this dotted black line that's on this map in terms of where Linnentown was located. According to federal records, as part of an urban renewal project, one called R50, the area including Linnentown, which on this map is this area right down here, as well as related area north of Baxter Street, was acquired through both fair sales and eminent domain in the early 1960s. In the course of the whole project, 65 households were displaced. and nearly $1 million of federal funding was provided, in addition to funds provided by both the City of Athens and the University System of Georgia. The correspondence that's available in records for the project does highlight the role of both Athens and the University of Georgia in this initiative. And so we see, for instance, on the right, a letter from Mayor Ralph Snow in Athens requesting assistance from the HHFA, which now I've forgotten what those acronyms mean, but the federal federal office related to urban renewal projects for assistance in getting this off the ground, and talks about an active collaboration between Athens and the University of Georgia, and ends with the phrase, "We feel that we do have a mutual problem that urban renewal would correct," and that mutual problem was the existence of communities like Lindentown close to campus. In addition, President of the University, O.C. Adderhold, wrote to Senator Richard B. Russell that this project was extremely important in terms of the growth and development of the University of Georgia. The area involved in the R50 redevelopment is west of Lumpkin Street and would clear out the total slum area that now exists off Baxter Street. And so I think it's important to note at the beginning that both of these institutions were key actors in how this all played out. So our specific question was then, what were the effects for Lindentown residents specifically, so residents of the Lindentown community, as a result of the displacement that happened in this urban renewal project when their properties were acquired. Most of the Lindentown residents, it was through eminent domain, and they were forced to relocate elsewhere, and we'll talk more about the details of that here in a second. In terms of how to measure that loss, we looked at two different things. So one, we looked at underpayment. That is, what is the amount that homeowners, property owners received for their properties, and how did it compare to what a quote unquote fair price would have been? And we tried to measure that fair price in two ways. The first was through looking at recent home sales in the neighborhood that surrounds where Lindentown once was, and use those recent home sales to estimate what the price of those properties would be if they still existed today. The Lindentown properties would be if they still existed today. The second one is that we compared the records of property owners in Lindentown to those in that neighborhood that was north of Baxter Street, and the amount that each of those individuals, households received for their properties, and did that seem to line up? Did the amount that people north of Baxter Street, an area that was predominantly white residents, did the amounts that they received match up to the amounts that we would have expected to see Lindentown residents received had those two neighborhoods been treated equally? And so those are two ways to assess underpayment. We did those as a kind of triangulation to be able to get a sense of, like, what did both of these measures tell us? Did they line up? Are they kind of in the same ballpark? The third thing that we looked at, the second measure, was lost appreciation, and that has to do with when residents relocated from Lindentown elsewhere, they might have relocated and purchased property in places with lower rates of appreciation, which is another kind of loss. If your property appreciates 10% in one neighborhood and only 5% in another one, there's a gap there of what you gain. And so we wanted to try to assess that from the records as best we could. I think it's important to note here at the outset that our research is not meant to cover all forms of loss. Most notably, through this process, it became clear that one, we're not able to really effectively capture, we don't have the records to capture effects on things like employment or education that happen in forced removal when you're forced to uproot yourself and move elsewhere, nor do we have the expertise to really create any kind of measure of the emotional trauma that comes with forced displacement and any kind of financial measurement that might correspond with that. That's just not the research team that we had, that's not our area of expertise. And so that's not something that was included in this particular evaluation. So to do this project, we drew heavily on records that are contained at the Special Collections Library at the University of Georgia. In particular, each property, pretty much every property, had slim to extensive records about the redevelopment and the acquisition of that property and what happened to people once they moved. So that includes everything from recorded property condition through the area of the parcels, each, the parcel boundaries themselves, the maps, things like that. And then where folks ended up when they moved, what their occupation was, what their income was. There's lots of information that we digitized. That took a fair amount of time. I had some students that worked with me back in spring of 2020 that helped take the scanned records that had been set up and change them into a form where we could do some analysis of those records. In addition, we looked at home prices because we wanted to understand rates of appreciation between the period when the redevelopment happened. We can go back to 1970 up through the present moment. And we do that through a couple of different ways. One, there's data on home values that's recorded in the 1970 census, and we use that as a starting point. And then we have records of home sales from the Athens-Clarke County tax assessor from 1990 through 2020, essentially is where we stopped. And we can assess in a much more detailed way there how property values have changed during the course of that time frame as well. And so we use that to measure rates of appreciation over time. So before we dig into the main research questions, let me just highlight a few things about the properties themselves. So as I mentioned, there's, for our purposes, there's two neighborhoods that were included in this R50 development. There was Lindentown, which is located here as the inside Lindentown area, and the area primarily north of Baxter Street, the outside Lindentown area. There were 41 parcels that we had records for outside Lindentown and 39 inside Lindentown. And then there's some other statistics here about those properties grouped by their method of acquisition. So I mentioned before, for the properties outside Lindentown, 23 of those were condemned and acquired through eminent domain, where 18 were sold with a fair market sale. So it's a little more than half were condemned, but still kind of 60-40. For the properties in Lindentown, there were 31 properties that were condemned, and only 8 were sold as fair sales. And so the use of eminent domain was much stronger there. There's a handful of properties where people appealed the eminent domain judgment and were successful in every case and received sometimes significantly more money when they were able to appeal those. The other thing I'll highlight just here in this short presentation is that if you take the price that people received, so the median sales price outside Lindentown was $11,500. The median sales price inside Lindentown was $5,600, or roughly half, right? If you adjust that by lot size, because the lots were also slightly larger outside Lindentown, you still have a pretty striking disparity, even just with this basic number, which is 78 cents per square foot of land outside Lindentown versus 56 cents per square foot of land inside Lindentown. And so there already we see there's a difference in how these neighborhoods were treated in terms of the way the project spend money to acquire those properties. So let's dig into the questions. So the first question was, let's use recent sales. So we identified 59 recent sales in 2010 census tract 2100, which includes the residential areas that are closest to where Lindentown once was. Lindentown's now university property, and so we can't use that as a comparison, but we can use the residential areas that are close to where Lindentown once stood. And there's 59 of those between 2019 and 2020. And we said, let's look at those sales and take two fairly straightforward variables that might predict the price that homeowners received. One is what's the area of the parcel itself, what's the land area, and the other one is what's the size of the house, the heated square footage, right? And when we do a regression model, a statistical model, what we see is each square foot of land area is associated with a $5 higher price, $5.16 essentially. And each square foot of heated structure, each square foot of building area is associated with a $239 basically increase in sales value. So what does that mean in practical value? We can go back and apply this to the Lindentown properties, right? So we can take, for instance, 187 Linden Row, which was occupied according to the records by Mr. John Henry Dillard. And the size of that parcel was 9,940 square feet. We don't know the structure size for these properties, but based on the records that we do have, we believe a reasonable global estimate for all properties is around 800 square feet. The average for the region, for the Southeast at the time, was 1,200, and we have reason to believe these were somewhat smaller than average, but 800 seemed like a reasonable choice for us. We can take the values that we talked about in the previous slide and apply them to these two variables. So there's 9,940 square feet of parcel area. You multiply that by $5, more or less, for value for every square footage. And then there's 800 square feet of structure size, and you multiply that by that roughly $240. There's a small adjustment here that just comes with any statistical model. It's a model constant. And when you look at the result, we estimate that that property today would be worth roughly $200,000. That would be the fair price it would receive if it was on the market right now. If we adjust for appreciation rates, the appreciation that we've seen in this area, the amount that Mr. Dillard actually received is only $114,000. So almost a little over half of what a fair price would have been. So we say this would be an underpayment of $87,000. The property would be worth $201,000. Today, adjusted for inflation, what he received is only $114,000. That means that there was a loss there of $87,000 in really wealth, in generational wealth that people accrue through owning property over time. I mentioned we have two methods. So sorry, before we get to the second method, when we add up all properties, so that was just one property, when we look at all the Lindentown properties, the cumulative value today, the fair price would be basically $8 million, $7,950,585. If you add up the amount that residents actually received and adjust it for appreciation, just like we did with Mr. Dillard, you end up with basically $4 million, $3,922,796. So therefore, the total underpayment is $4,027,789. That is the amount that was underpaid to property owners in Lindentown. The second question, we asked the same question, what was the underpayment? But in this case, we used records for the properties that were primarily north of Baxter Street as the comparison group. So similarly, we run a model. Here we have the number of rooms in properties, and so we use that as a variable in this model, and rather than square footage of property, because there's so much uncertainty there, we can't really draw from it. So we say each listed room is associated with about $1,496 of value, and each square foot of parcel area here is associated with about 21 cents of property value. And both of these are in $1963. So you'd multiply by roughly 9 to get to today's dollars. And so we use this to estimate if Lindentown owners had been treated in the same way as folks outside Lindentown were, if the method used to determine the value of their property was the same, both inside and outside Lindentown, what should that amount have been, right? So if we go back to 187 Linden Row, we know it was 9,940 square feet. The property records indicate there was 5 rooms present. So we apply those same values, 9,940 square feet times 21 cents per square foot of property. And then 5 room times basically $1,500 per room. And then the adjustment here is actually a positive one. The constant is 1142. We end up with $10,714 is the amount that Mr. Dillard should have received. What he did receive was $6,250. So again, that's an underpayment of $4,464, or if you adjust for appreciation, almost $80,000 in this case, right? I'll note that the number here, if we adjust this for the appreciation rates, it's 195,645. If we go back 2 slides, or a few slides here, this number in the first method was 201. And I think it's important to point out that both these methods use very different ways of thinking through what the fair price would have been, but they end up pretty close to one another, $195,000 and $200,000. And to me, that's a good sign that we're on the right track, that both these methods are kind of honing in on what that fair value should have been, right? So with this method, if we do the same thing, if we add up for all the properties, what would the fair value have been if they were treated the same as the white property owners nearby? It would have been about $6,985,638. Adjusting for appreciation, this number is the same, 3.9 million. And so here the calculated underpayment is slightly smaller, $3,062,842. But again, it's kind of in the same ballpark. 3 to 4 million is what we're looking at here, right? So in the end, we're gonna say that method 1 is the one that we prefer, and we prefer it because it's just got stronger empirics behind it. It's got stronger data behind it. We have recent home sales, and we know a lot about those recent home sales, and so I have more confidence in that number. We also the number for the residents outside Lindentown, this method 2, may reflect some underpayment for them as well, especially since eminent domain was still used there. We don't know exactly how that played out. There could have been some ways that residents didn't receive the full value of their property. And so we trust that first method a little bit more. But I will just emphasize that having these 2 numbers line up fairly closely gives us greater confidence in our first estimate. And the other thing that second estimate does that I think is worth noting, that we think is worth noting, is that it highlights how Lindentown residents receive substantially less for their properties than the white homeowners who were also included in that redevelopment, that there was something specific about Lindentown that resulted in substantial underpayment to that community and to the residents of that community. The third question that we have is related to appreciation. And so it's this question of when people moved, did they lose out on wealth generation through property appreciation, right? And so what we did here is this is the most kind of complex math that we did, and the report lays this all out. We basically looked at census data from 1970 to 1990 to see how much homes appreciated within census tracts between that 20 years. And then from 1990 onward, we used those same census tract boundaries to assess appreciation from 1990 through 2020. And then we can say basically what were homes worth in 2020 in the census tract, what were they worth in 1970, and what's the rate of appreciation that results. We also do things like look at owners who became renters, and there we judge not against the appreciation where they moved, but looking at rates of inflation as the benchmark, saying they took this money, they weren't able to purchase a new home, they didn't benefit from any appreciation, but maybe they put it in a bank and there is inflation over time, which is again about 9%. And we look at that. One complication with this is we don't have relocation records for a lot of folks. So if you look at the folks who are actually owner-occupied properties, so we talk about property owners, this is for owner-occupied properties, places where people who are relocated were the ones that owned. 35 people inside Lindentown fit that description, 35 households, and 35 outside Lindentown fit that description. In both cases, the majority of those, we don't know exactly what happened when they were done. But for the residents inside Lindentown, we know that 13 households have a report. The records indicate that they purchased homes after leaving Lindentown. 4 of them became renters, and 1 of them also purchased a property that was classified as technically a multifamily. I think it was a quadplex over in the east side of town, right? And so we can see what the outcomes were here, and we're going to have to, basically what we assume is that there's 13 plus 4 plus 1, 18 records here. We basically assumed similar outcomes, so a similar distribution, 13, 3, and 1, say. And then said, how would the numbers line up with it? So we'll go back to Mr. Dillard. He purchased a new property when he moved, we know, in East Athens. The tract number is 3200. It's off what's now MLK Boulevard. And the appreciation rate there since 1970, we had calculated as 1,275%. That is, the property is worth that much more now than it was back in 1970. In Lindentown, the appreciation rate was 1826 in that area near Lindentown. So substantially higher, 551% higher rates of appreciation. So if we just take the amount he received, this is not the fair price. This is the amount he actually received, $6,250. If it had appreciated in Lindentown, today it would be worth $114,125 at this rate of appreciation, 1,826%. Where he moved to, if he took that same amount, $6,250, and bought a home in East Athens and it appreciated at 1,275%, that home would now only be worth $79,711. That's another loss to him of $34,000 of wealth that happened as a direct result of the displacement, his being forced out of a place where he could have enjoyed higher appreciation on his property, right? So we can then go through and calculate these numbers for the folks that we know where they went, those 18 people with known relocation outcomes. We'd say lost appreciation is about $250,000. If we assume similar outcomes for the folks that we don't have records for, that's another $323,000 in the way that is set up. And then we also, as I said, looked at owners who became renters and basically compared the amount they would have received in appreciation to the same amount with inflation adjusted. And that's another $417,000. We total all 3 of these up, and it's about $1 million, $994,586 in lost appreciation as a result of displacement. If people had been able to stay, they would have gained that much more wealth through property appreciation. So this is the kind of grand total slide here. Based on underpayment, we use that first estimate for the reasons that I said. I think there's just better data to support that number, and that's about $4 million. The loss from low appreciation is about $1 million, $995,000, just a hair under $1 million. And then you add those 2 numbers together, the combined losses is $5,022,375. So that's what we say is the loss that's due to displacement that's related to property valuation, both because of underpayment and lower appreciation. Just a couple limitations to note on this. So we do have those missing records, especially for relocation outcomes. And so there's some uncertainty around this estimate. But as I said, I feel pretty good that this number seems consistent, right? In when we looked at a couple different methods for doing it, that's almost always a good sign. It doesn't include any financial losses other than property, which I stated at the beginning, things like job changes, transportation costs, inability to get future jobs, impact on education, and also does not include compensation for the trauma of forced relocation. And if you look at the narratives of Lindentown residents, several of whom are on this call, there's clearly multiple places where this was a deeply traumatic event for many of them that's impacted them for the rest of their lives. So I will stop there. I will point out, as I said, there's an electronic version of the full report available at this link. You can also email me and the Community Mapping Lab site, so communitymappinglab.org. If you go to the Lindentown link that's on the home screen there, you can find a copy of that report to download and look through. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I welcome, I assume the procedure is I welcome any questions that y'all might have.
Can I just say bravo? My mind just got blown. This is crazy, but thank you. I heard the figure, but I did not know about the methodology, and incredibly impressive.
Thanks.
I would like to say that due to all the missing data and all the research that had to be compiled and all the mathematical methodology that had to go into all of this and communicating with the first descendants, all the pieces, all the moving pieces. I would just like to thank you all, your whole team, for what you all have done. I don't know if anything has been done anywhere in the country that have been actually a number placed for loss in a property value. I don't know that, but I think this is the first time that I'm aware of that it's been done here in Georgia. The Justice
we
and
weren't
Memory
aware of any models to work from. I mean, this kind of work of assessing, what a property would be worth today has been done, but not in this context, not in this historical context that we're aware of.
Right. Due to urban renewal anyway. So I just want to thank you all for what you all have done. It blows my mind. I'm not a math person anyway, but I'm glad to see you all be able to do this. So thank you from the Lindentown Project and the Justice and Memory team.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, well, thank you.
I can just
Chair
jump in with a
Shannon.
quick
Thank you.
question.
Yep, thanks.
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, okay, question.
I was just trying to, I just wanted to make sure everyone got to speak that. And maybe this is, again, thank you, Jerry. I've been aware that you're doing this work, and thank you so much for doing it, your whole team, and then presenting it in a pretty darn legible fashion given the complexity. So thank you very much. So this is somewhat probably for the group, but in case there's any clarifying questions where Dr. Shannon's helpful, I'm curious in our role as an advisory committee to the mayor, what this information, like what kind of next steps are. And again, Jerry, I know this may not be directly relevant, and you might be hopping off in a moment, but is there a sense of next steps or where this information goes from here, or is it simply to be presented for information? What's sort of the idea of the from the advisory committee standpoint and the mayor who commissioned this? What's the next step?
I don't think Dr. Shannon can answer that question, but what we're going to do right now is, thank you, Jerry, but we're going to.
Sorry, Jerry, you can go.
Go ahead.
It was I appreciate being able to share this research with y'all.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
I think what we're going to do as a team right now is to vote. As Justice Remember team, we have to vote to accept this presentation, and then from here, it will go and be presented to the mayor and commissioners from here. Okay, but we have to vote on now accepting the presentation.
So Jan, you want to go ahead? I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
I am very eager to formally approve of the report. I mean, I think people need to know this information, and we need to start working it into, our plans as a government. However, as a point of order, do we have a quorum for a vote today?
Yes.
I was wondering.
We do? Okay. I just want to make sure. I was looking at the participants. I wasn't sure if we had. Not enough people since there's some folks missing, but cool.
Looks like we have 5 voting members. I don't know what a quorum is.
We
in this
have
context.
a quorum is 5. So we can move on, and Jen, you want to go ahead and carry it
Well,
to
is
the
there any
right?
discussion on that? I mean, like, so, is there, so, I mean, I guess someone has to make a motion. So like, if somebody wants to make a motion to accept this report, as that the Justice in Memory Project would like to accept the report as information that it sees, you know, that it was played a role in commissioning and sees as useful to the charge. Someone has to make a motion. It has to be seconded
I'll make that motion.
to accept the report as the,
I make a motion to accept the report, yeah.
okay. You want to second it, Hattie? Or...
I'll second it.
Okay. All right. So let's just do a voice vote on this. So all those voting members on the call who vote to approve accepting Dr. Shannon and his colleagues' report say yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Okay. Anyone opposed? And abstain. Okay. Now, I mean, I guess
Now,
it's yeah. Go
okay,
ahead.
now I think the next step is to go to the work sessions for the mayor and commissioners. So that's an action item. Taylor. Does that answer your question, Jen? What you was
Yeah, I
asking
mean,
earlier?
I you know, I haven't been as closely involved in this aspect of the
Okay,
committee's work, so
okay.
it was a genuine question that I didn't know the answer to. So can
Okay.
staff, like, so can staff follow up on how this would be, when this would be scheduled at the work session, and what that might entail?
Nikki, I see a finger up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Fingers. Yes, ma'am. So I think that we would need to take another vote on whether or not we want to send this recommendation to the mayor and commission via a work session. And as we're thinking about that, you know, I know the $5 million is the output. You know, how that works with the gratuity clause, and how are we going to like present this moving forward? Are we going to present this at work session for information purposes only? Is that the intent?
I think that's the question.
Mariah, hand is up. Mariah, go ahead.
I mean, we could be presented this. We could also take action as the mayor commission to also approve of the findings of the study, like formally accept the report as well. I think functionally, in our considerations moving forward, I think that checking this against any forms of either committed or expended funds that have been requested by the Justice and Memory team. I know that last year there were some requests made, one of which at least was honored in the last year's budget. That might be a next step that others would like to see, just to understand, okay, where, you know, what do we have the money to do? Since like it's $5 million is a lot of money in the grand scheme of like my life or your life, but in the grand scheme of like the government, I think it's an amount that we should be judicious with. So just my thoughts.
This number, just to for some clarification, the $5 million is going to be divided by 2. Which what I'm saying is the responsibility will be split. It will be divided by 2. A portion of that, half of that will be Athens-Clarke County, and the other half will be the University of Georgia.
So procedurally, I think it is important to say that's the ask of the Lennon project that's been put on the table. That is not necessarily the recommendation that's been discussed and adopted in the Justice and Memory Project. I just don't want a procedural step to
Right.
this. So I mean, we're
wanted
really. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to accept the presentation. We getting into where we're going from here, but I just wanted to vote to accept the presentation that he just presented today. And then I maybe like Commissioner Parker is saying is that, and I think Nikki Jones is saying that we have to determine a recommendation where we go from here to the work session. And I don't know what that is yet. This is new to me too, but we're going to have to determine that. But it will. When the Leonardtown project met, we were not trying to give all the $5 million to the city of Athens. So we have to talk, we have to work through that. If we want a subcommittee to work through that, then I can put one together and then bring it back and we can talk about it. If we're not in a position to talk to it today.
So my feeling is a presentation with a work session should have tangible recommendations and asks from this committee, the Justice and Memory
Right.
Project, right? I do think we need to make sure we run things through the proper channels. And I think if there's specific actionable items, that is best to have those identified and then agreed upon in this group, because I think just presenting it as an informational item without tangible advisory pieces to that information could just mean it's like, here's some information and then it doesn't really have. So I think
Right.
that means we have some work to do. So I think today, the AJMP says, okay, yep, we feel like this report and the work
It's
done by
acceptable.
Jerry is acceptable and met the request. So we have work to do on our end, receive of what kinds of then recommendations from this advisory committee based on that number could be presented to the mayor and commission as next steps. Does that sound right, Ms. Hattie and Commissioner Parker and everybody?
That's correct, way I understand. So what I'm asking is, do I need to put a few people together to work on the ask before it goes to the mayor commissioner's work session?
Absolutely, yeah.
How does that work though, Nikki, with a subcommittee, I guess would be my
Well,
pulling together people from this actual committee to delegate tasks for the recommendation that's going forward in an agenda item for the work session.
I guess, what I'm hearing right now is, one, that the action we took today, or the advisory group took today, was that y'all accepted the report.
Mhm.
And then in the future, there is the intent to go back to mayor and commission in a work session to talk about this report and then have concrete recommendations. So
Right.
wouldn't it be the advisory committee doing the work, not a subcommittee? Is that
Well,
what you're
I
saying,
was
Selah? Is like the difference between a subcommittee and this advisory
Yes.
committee doing the work?
I was trying to say the subcommittee that's made up of this group right here.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't talking about any outside group. I'm like, people from this group right here, the Justice and Memory Project, could just work on it and then bring it back to the entire group, but not
Certainly.
assemble another subgroup, a subgroup from this committee.
Right.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because we've got a lot of different initiatives, projects, things we're working on. So if there's somebody who's not working on something else that could take the lead on, I mean, this is going to take some research. It's going to take some conversations with experts, the wonderful input from Selah, Nikki, others. I mean, so I think the idea is who from the HAMP can lead the kind of subgroup that's going to do the research and recommend research to what kinds of things we could recommend. I guess we need to find out, but we were missing a few folks on this call. So it could be like, for example, Charlene might be willing to do that. Or did you have someone in mind, Miss Hattie, that would lead that effort from the current AJMP?
Well, I'll tell you what, I can, let me contact members. We don't have to do that today, but I will contact some individuals from this team
Yeah,
to work on that and then bring it back to the full team.
great.
If you all can agree to that.
If I could offer staff's help too, if y'all need it in any way. So for example, I do want to make sure that we're clear on like the gratuities clause. And I think it'd be good for the attorney's office to come and talk to this group whenever you all are ready, as kind of a step to move forward. And then, whenever this group comes up with some tangible things, for example, maybe it's affordable housing. We are happy to reach out to our network and bring some affordable housing folks in here to talk about ways that maybe we could work together on generating affordable housing as a recommendation. Much like we did, Commissioner Parker, with the HRC, as we were kind of developing the HRC, we were bringing folks in, at these different junctures and providing some input. And I think the LRC folks thought that was beneficial and to help develop, their recommendation to the full mayor commission. So staff is ready and willing to help out in that way.
Okay, Nikki, do you
I
want to be a
will
part of
say
that subgroup?
Well, I think staff is just here to provide whatever resource that you need.
Okay, so
And
you wanted the support, okay.
yes, ma'am, in any way that you need.
All right, well, I'll reach out to individuals in this group and I will get you as a support person. Is that okay with you for support?
Yes, ma'am. Sayla and I both.
Okay. Sayla, you have been nominated as well to be support.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Parker, were you trying to say something?
I mean, it's probably just for future knowledge as the subcommittee starts working, but I think our discussion of the gratuities clause, which, you know, Hattie and I and others met extensively with the attorney's office early on in our committee's journey. And I feel like we're pretty well versed at this point. I think a lot of our recommendations from last budget cycle are very much informed by like the constraints of that. But, you know, having that staff expertise on hand as we, you know, reignite those conversations will be helpful. I think that might have preceded Manager Jones's life in Athens. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay. I think I'm clear on everything right now. Okay. Okay, well, I will be reaching out.
I'm going to have to run shortly. So I just wanted to see if there's anything else
Yes,
that is, like, requires a quorum that I can help with.
We do. We're going to have to vote on the presentation that from the work session that Dr. Rice on the walk of recognition. We needed to vote on that because it's supposed to be voted on by the mayor and commissioners next month. So let's go ahead and since we have a quorum and to vote on the presentation as approved. Okay.
So, that's not my understanding procedurally. I think it's moving its way through the 3 meetings, the work session, the agenda, and the voting. And we've done our part. We pushed it to the work session, and now it does its 1, 2, 3 work session, agenda, voting. We've already basically done that.
But there
Right,
was no formal vote. The February meeting where you gave the walk of recognition presentation to this full group with like the 3 pictures of the base structure and the images for the mosaic. We never had a vote.
We're going back and just cleaning it up.
Yeah, I must have missed. Was there correspondence about this sent out in advance of this meeting that I must did I miss? This is just the first time hearing of this missing vote. Am I missing some correspondence or something?
From what if this is going to be voted on by the mayor and commissioners and we have not voted on it, then we need, what's the problem with voting on it today?
No, we can. I recall that meeting. I gave a very similar presentation and said, I'm going to do this at the work session. I guess if there wasn't a formal vote and that's all we're talking about, I understand that, but,
okay, that's all for the vote.
Okay.
That's it. We just didn't vote.
I make a motion
to accept.
I make a motion that we accept the presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
Hattie, somebody second that?
I second the motion.
Okay, so all those in favor of accepting presentation on the walk of recognition from last meeting, say yes. Yes. Anyone opposed? Abstain. All right, thanks for clarifying what we were voting on.
Okay,
Thank you,
I gotta run.
Mariah.
Thanks, y'all.
You can hop off now. Okay. Dr. Rice, you want to go ahead and speak if you have any updates?
Sure.
You want to talk about the...
Yeah, and apologies, I just wasn't aware that we had that procedural issue till just now. I'm starting to wonder, if something's going on with my email. Okay, so walk of recognition updates are quite straightforward. We are moving through that process we just described, which is a big deal. It's exciting. It's an important next step, an important formality for the walk of recognition to be created and built in its various components. So we did present at the work session this month. I gave a presentation that similar to what we just voted on, and went over what is going on with the walk of recognition generally, the components of the mosaic. We did show the preliminary structures. There's 3 preliminary structures. All this is available on the website, the agendas with the agendas. And then we took questions. We had a great discussion. And I want to say thank you to all of the people, Sayla and Nikki on this call, plus many others working in the government and our elected officials, obviously Commissioner Parker. Thank you so much for getting us to that point. I'm not even naming everybody. So then we went to the agenda setting, that item went to the agenda setting meeting. That was last night. I viewed it. I wasn't able to attend. And my understanding is the actual things that they are considering for the agenda that will appear on the next voting meeting is an RFP for the historical signage. So that will bring in a company, an interpretive graphic design firm, to create the 3 historical signs. And then Sayla, remind me, what are the other things they're going to be voting on? The concept in general, the general concept for the Walk of Recognition. It doesn't have a final design for the mosaic, but the general concept. And then what are the other things, Sayla? Help me.
So what we kind of titled it was public art location, style, and type. So we're requesting the location, which is the right of way on Finley Street, the style and the type, which would be the 3 historical interpretive signage that is going out for the RFP, and then the participatory art mosaic as the second concept or style and type in that concept.
Great. So
that will be back, I apologize, in the work session in August with the schematics of what those actual designs will be.
Great. So in the May 3rd voting meeting, we're getting a vote on the general concept, including all the items you just mentioned, and then the RFP for the signage. Those are the two things that are being authorized, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then that means May 3rd, the Walk of Recognition's finally at a voting meeting. I think this is exciting. I hope people out there, hi public, I hope you'll communicate your enthusiasm for the project to your commissioners, to the mayor, to your neighbors, whoever you want to tell that you're excited about it. That is important that we that you feel like you can express that excitement at a voting meeting. That would be May 3rd. And then the only other item that has been discussed in the work session, as well as some of the coverage of it, is it came to our attention that for Dr. Lynn Saunders Bussell to be present as the person who's working on the participatory community art aspects, that we are lacking a formal mechanism related to questions of liability and being able to be contracted with the city for procurement. We are doing a first of its kind type project, so these things pop up in process. So Sayla and Nikki and others are working with us, and there was also input from the commissioners on what a mechanism might look like to allow Dr. Bussell to continue being formally involved through the completion and construction of the mosaic. So that's all the updates I have. Next month, I'm going to start showing some of that participatory art that Dr. Bussell's been doing. I kind of realized that maybe we talk about it, but there's like in the abstract, like the actual material work, the actual relationship building, the actual education, the actual engagement has been going on for several months now, so I wanted to just give an overview of that at the next meeting so people can start to get a sense. I've been in the classroom with Lynn, so I have a sense, and Miss Hattie's been in things, so we're going to try to I'll give a presentation next month on what does that participatory community art piece look like that Dr. Bussell's so essential to, has been, and needs to be through the end.
Okay, all right.
That's
Okay.
accurate, Miss Hattie, and everybody else, accurate summary?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a brief overview on the History Center. I also went to the work session, and just to update, that was all I did, was to update the mayor and commissioners where we were and what the next steps are. So the next step in the History Center is to participate in our RFP process. So whenever that committee is ready and sends that out, we will be participating in that. We asked for acquisition of lease agreement for the Athens-Clarke County building in a building. So, and then the last thing, we're looking at funding, and we got to be able to continue to focus on funding so the History Center can be able to run its own operations. So hopefully we will be able to do that. And the 5013C has already been filed for the History Center. So that's where we are as far as the History Center. It's just an overview, update, and that's it.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. Do anybody have anything else? We're running close to an hour, but we hadn't got an hour yet. Anybody else need anything? Jen, are you muted?
Speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry, you think I'd know that by now. And I just am curious approximately how long it might take for us to be able to have another meeting with the appropriate staff and members of this committee about the Dr. Bustle piece. Are we looking at a few days, a few weeks? I think Dr. Bustle's plans of next steps sort of also depends on what the nature of that next step for her continued involvement looks like. So when might you be able to have a meeting on that?
Great question. And tomorrow morning, late afternoon or early afternoon, we'll be sending out an email that we, at the work session, we promised we sent out an email to the Athens Justice and Memory folks, mayor and commission all together to describe the three options for us to move forward. So you'll get that tomorrow. Ms. Hattie, you may get a direct email from the manager.
Okay.
But everybody else will get an email, and then Ms. Hattie, you'll be included in that as well. I think the manager just wanted to make it formal.
Okay.
Great. So there's gonna be 3 identified options that
Absolutely.
will satisfy. Thank you so much for the work on that and doing
Of
it
course.
so promptly and speedily, if that's a word. Thank you. Thank you.
So I
We'll
think the
look forward to
follow-on
that.
to that would probably be a meeting, right? So we'd have another, once we had time to digest the information, then we'd have a follow-on to discuss, make sure we're all on the same page.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for putting that together.
Of course.
Anything else? If not, I'm getting ready to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Good to see everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Everybody stay blessed. All right.
All right.
Bye.